I like to start at least 2 or maybe 3 or 4 horses in the round trail all at the same time. Because I go over here and I work this bay horse, let's say. He makes some progress. Maybe I just get up to him and pet him. I can't even get a rope on him, can't get a halter on him yet. But I get up there and he lets me pet him, okay? Now I'm gonna go over here and start working with this other horse, the sorrel horse. The bay horse gets a rest. Yeah. And that's one of my best tools in the toolbox, is how to manage the stress to your advantage. In other words, they get on the high alert. What are you going to do now? And they do this, do that, do the other. Okay, let's let him rest, and I'll go back to the bay horse. He's had a rest. He's got the dopamine, the serotonin. He's licked his lips and all that. Maybe he's even got a hind leg cocked over there. Yeah. But it was the stress that allowed him to come back and find that cocktail. So I just go bouncing back and forth. So whether it's 2 horses, 3 horses, 4 horses, I can do 3 horses, let's say, and advance all 3 of them, let's say, to a certain level in the same amount of time that I can do one. And for a lot of years, I'd done a contract colt starting business where I'd travel around to different training barns and race tracks and do big numbers of horses. I've done as many as almost 100 horses in one contract. Now, I had a crew helping me. Yeah. But the point is I went all around and, I was getting paid to do it, but the bigger motivator was I had a lot of white rats to experiment with. And the more subjects I had, the more I could learn about this. And that's when I was really, basically just before Steve and I hooked up, I was doing like 500 horses a year. I'm not saying I put a month on them, but it was initiating those first impressions. Some of them are horses that had been handled. Some of them horses that had bad experiences. Some of them were fresh, whatever. It didn't matter. It just made it interesting to have all these different subjects to work with, all these different white rats. And, I had a system that worked pretty good, but I was always saying, but what if I'd done this and tweaked this a little bit more? Would it be better? Would it be worse? A lot of times we go, well, it ain't any better. So I'll just keep doing, this other process. But anyway, that's coming back to Steve Peters. Well, that was a big thing.
How would you say the things you've taught have evolved over the decades, over your career? What have you seen that has progressed?
Well, it's been a lot of work for me because, if you, and I don't know much about this, but so I'm assuming, if you go to school to learn how to be a school teacher, first of all, you sit in class for however many years, 18 years or 20-some years, whatever, with taking in instruction. But at whatever point you want to be a college professor, you have ideas, but they've also taught you the psychology and whatever of teaching. So you've got a lot of information on how to be a teacher. I had a hard time getting past the 8th grade. I had no interest in going to college. 0. I had all the school I wanted, and I didn't even want to finish high school, but just because it was the thing to do, I did. But like I said, I beat a trail to Nevada to get around them horsemen. But the trouble is, as teachers, they didn't know how to teach. They learned by just watching other people. And in some environments, some ranches, it was kind of looked down on to tell somebody else how they should be riding their horse. And, so to a lot of those guys, not Tom and Ray, but a lot of those other mentors, they couldn't tell you how to do it because nobody told them. They observed, and they might give them a little, tighten that curb strap a little bit, or, get your hand forward a little bit, or weight that outside stirrup, little nuggets. But they wasn't there to hold your hand. You still had to kind of figure out, how much do I weight that stirrup?
Gotcha.
How tight or loose do I have that curb strap? You still got to work at it. But those are the people that I learned. So anyway, I ranched for, till I was in my 40s. That was my primary income. And riding outside horses off and on. But I never really started giving clinics till I was kind of in my 40s somewhere. And not knowing how to teach. And you can't go give a clinic and say, okay, watch me, and then you come out here and do this. They need more information than that, right? And the other thing, these people didn't come to me with the experience that I sought out. Tom Marvel and Ray and Tom Dorrance and Melvin Jones and Gene Lewis and that. I left home after high school. I went down to Marvel's to improve my saddle bronc riding. It wasn't like I just got my first horse last week and I wanted to take it to a clinic and get it started. As a matter of fact, I'd qualified to go to the national finals high school rodeo. And, I was just hanging and rattling. I could ride them, but it wasn't necessarily pretty as far as, being a classy looking bronc rider. So I was trying to refine my saddle bronc riding and learn about bridle horses from Tom Marvel. His boys were all PRCA saddle bronc riders at the time. They were on the road. So anyway, I'd already paid my dues and I'd wore out a lot of horse shows, kid growing up, horseback every day, blah, blah, blah. I had a lot of experience. I knew a lot of things that didn't work. And so check that box, I want to start learning the things that do work. You know, when I take a hold of this horse and he throws his head in the air, I want to be able to take a hold of him and him stick a hind leg in the ground, turn around. So, you know, I was seeking that information. So anyway, that's kind of, you know, the areas I wanted to learn in. And the way I learned is just riding more horses and getting around more people so I could kind of steal ideas from little nuggets here and there, but watching how different people do the same thing, like to get a horse to turn or whatever it might be, work a cow, whatever. But anyway, so when I go to teaching, it's like, these guys are from a different planet. Most of them are recreation riders. I didn't want to take Ray's words and, you know, try to convince anybody that I can teach you what Ray taught me or what Ray would want you to know.
Yeah.
All I can give you is what works for me. You know, somebody said one time, do you do that Tom Dorrance Ray Hunt stuff? And I said, no. And they looked at me like, I thought you was one of those. I said, no, I tried. It didn't work for me. I got to do the Martin Black stuff. And the other thing is, you know, I've worked hard. I've broke bones. I've drew a lot of blood on myself working for this. Made a lot of mistakes. And I don't want Tom or Ray to take credit for my mistakes. You know, some people can't get that. And I'm not blowing my own horn. I don't mean it that way. I learn a lot from people that are doing it wrong. Yeah. They reinforce, you know, that little bit that I'm doing isn't going to work either. Yeah. You want people that yeah, you know, are doing it wrong and think, all right, I have an ounce of that in my program.
Not enough people give enough credit to their own experience. And maybe that's where a lot of people who make the same mistake over and over again get lost because they don't trust to even know whether they should stop doing what they're doing or not. But
well, you know, Ray Hunt or anybody else can't make you a good horseman.
Yeah.
You can't watch the videos. You can't go to his clinics. You can't. And Ray would say this too. You're going to have to ride a lot of horses. The clinics ain't going to do it. Now, if you've rode a lot of horses, you know, and myself and some other friends of mine, clinicians that rode with Ray early on the ranches and everything. Yeah, but they had a lot of experience on horses, and it doesn't matter. I'm talking from a ranching background. We was trying to make horses, good horses from the time, as long as I can remember. As soon as I quit falling off, I was trying to get them to stop and turn better. And just because I grew up in that kind of a culture, you know, and I don't mean to say you had to grow up on a ranch. There's plenty of guys that ride as many hours a horseback and probably cover as many miles, even though they never leave the arena, is what we did out on the ranch. But again, they might be riding 10 horses a day and they're working cows and loping circles and training them to rein and whatever it might be, jumping, it doesn't matter. But they don't own one horse for 20 years. And trail ride on it. And when that horse dies, they get one more horse. I mean, like I said, I was handling 500 horses, just contract starting on the road. That's not counting all the horses I rode at home in the summer or outside horses, you know, my own horses that I rode. You know, in between that, I was throwing my leg over well over 500 horses in a year, even though it might have just been, you know, 15 minutes on this first ride and maybe 20 minutes, you know, on the fifth ride. And then I turn them over to the exercise riders or the assistants in the cutting barn or whatever, but they're ready to ride off and go now. And that's the only reason they had me there. I don't need to be there for 30 days.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 to 10 days. And I was headed down the road to the next place and they could handle it from there. It's just that initial stuff, you know, if they're not bucking and not pulling around and pulling away from you and running off, and I'd get them past that. So, and that was the deal. It wasn't like I was putting a lot of miles on them. Yeah. But to me, that was the greatest learning opportunity. And financially, it was good for my clients. From a scientific research, it was wonderful for me.
I know you brought up a little bit of this back in the beginning, but since this is one of the main topics, one of the big topics that I cover, I want to go back a little bit to what the Spanish and the Mexicans called Bustaños, right? And your family knew as range horses. And kind of what was their history there? Any connection with your family and the horses that were running out wild on the range?
First of all, there was very few horses running wild on the range before
70.
The government took over.
Right. So
before the Wild Horse Act was passed.
Yeah.
So kind of to go back in the 1800s, we'll just start there and real quick. There were no horses on the range when my family came, okay? There weren't any cattle on the range when my family came. What cattle they started out with were either oxen to pull the wagons. A lot of the wagon trains had oxen instead of horses or mules.
Or dairy cows, probably.
And first thing they come up with, and I can't even tell you where they got them, but, well, a lot of them came with the wagon train leading behind but anyway, it didn't take them long to get in the dairy business, basically. Now, you think of the dairy business today, you know, big barns, and they feed them grain and put them in the head catch and, you know, put the milking machine on it. No, these cattle ran out. They didn't have hay. They didn't put up hay till the hard winter of 88 and 89. There was very little hay. It was a mild climate in relation to the late 1880s. So anyway, they'd wrangle the cows every morning, milk them, turn them back out, wrangle them that night, milk them again. And they processed cream and made butter and cheese. The milk, I mean, there really was no market for the milk.
Gotcha.
Like today, they put it in a tanker truck and haul it all over and people drink milk.
Yeah. So there was no beef cattle other than that up until later on, right?
No.
And there was no horses along with that, basically.
Not range horses, no.
No. Okay.
I mean, anything out on the range, good luck with the Indians not eating them.
Mm.
I mean, that was fair game. I mean, they feed a lot more Indian with a milk cow or a mule, or they had no loyalty to mules or horses. It was a food source for them.
Right.
Now, they rode them, sure. But what I'm saying is, if there was anything extra,
Oh yeah, dinner.
you know, if they didn't need the and a lot of ranches ate horse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people don't like to think about that or talk about that. You know, I mean, if you say you eat a horse or a dog, you might as well say you'd eat grandma or something. I mean, they're that attached.
Yeah.
But before these were companion animals, they were farm animals.
Yeah.
You know, so, but yeah, there wasn't anything. And so we're talking in the 1860s when my family first come there, early 1860s. And it wasn't until 1870 that law was passed in California that closed the open range. If you wanted to have cattle outside, it was your job to keep them off the feeder ground. So if you could keep them up in the mountains or down somewhere where there wasn't any farming area, they stayed. But they couldn't just run next to these guys that are putting in wheat and stuff. Because if their cattle got in the wheat field, they bought the wheat field. And, you know, I mean, they bought the wheat out of the wheat field. They didn't buy the ground. They just bought the crop. And that's the way the law was, from my understanding, in California. So a lot of the ranchers had stuffed that. They came to the Great Basin. And so kind of in the 70s is when the herds, mainly cattle herds, started building up. And so that's when my family kind of merged from the supplying the miners and milk cows, and they got in the horse deal. My paternal side, like I say, they was mainly horses. They was more interested in horses. They got good at breaking horses and managing horses and selling horses. Like I said, they'd sell them in Nevada. They'd sell them to the military. Military was a good market and a reliable market.
Yeah.
Didn't matter, you know, what the economy was, whatever. I mean, the Army needed horses.
How were they catching them back then?
What's that?
How were they catching them back then?
Let's say they'd go out and gather a country and there might be 100, 500, whatever number there was. So they would hold them up out there in a roe deer. It might be a rim rock or something that they'd kind of hold one side of them on or something like that. But they would hold them up out there and they would cut out however many they was going to break, maybe 20 geldings. I know these horses had been gathered before because they'd been branded and castrated, and they probably went out there at least once a year and held these horses up and sorted them, if not maybe 10 times a year. I don't know what they do 10 times, but it might be more than once anyway. So they would bring this 20 or 30 or 50 or however many horses. Or they might bring in 20 and start them and then turn them back out, bring another 20 in. I can just imagine that, you know, they're if they are going to take 100 horses to Nevada on a big circle, they're not going to start 100 all at once. They don't have the manpower for it or the krills to hold them in. So now again, they had fenced fields, maybe 160-acre homestead. So you bring these horses in the day and work them, whatever you're doing, and turn them back out in this, so you don't have to go gather them off the range. But anyway, they'd get however many horses broke. And broke just means walk, trot, stop, turn right, turn left, back up, mount and dismount, basically. That's all the Army wanted to see. You didn't have to pick a foot up. And a lot of the horses, they laid them down to shoe them.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a big, long reach. And when I was a little kid, the majority of our horses, we laid them down to show.
Yeah, that's incredible. I remember I went out to what's the fort in Nebraska? Oh,
The military?
yes, the big old cavalry fort.
Is that Fort Riley?
No, it's in western Nebraska, but it started out as a fort against Wounded Knee, where all the Sioux were ordered to gather, basically, and then later turned into the cavalry fort, and they had thousands of horses going through there for World War I and all that, and a lot of them were coming out of those same situations, those same channels.
Yep. So that's kind of the background of the range horses in my family. But then what a lot of people I don't think are aware of is what the mechanized revolution, mainly World War II, done to the horse market.
Yeah.
So World War I, horses were still big with the military, but yet in the agricultural world in general, and a lot of those horses they shipped back to the Midwest, they went to horse dealers all over the East Coast. I mean, you think of horses, you got people that are selling horses fresh broke off the range, like what we sent back there. My ancestors sent back there. But then you got this 50-year-old horse that's kind of got smarter than the people. So that's like buying a used car that doesn't run very good. There was horse dealers, just like there's car dealers. Drive down the street in any town, bigger town, how many car dealers are there?
Right.
Okay, what was their transportation in the old days? It wasn't automobiles. It was horses.
Yep.
So they pulled a buggy or they rode them. It was horses. They weren't big draft horses. They were light horses pulling like these thoroughbred horses and whatnot my family sent back there. So there's a huge market for horses. And that country out there, you never have to trim their feet. You don't have to worry about viruses or vaccinations. It's an ideal horse country. That's why they run so many horses out there instead of Missouri. They would get viruses in the Midwest or wherever and wipe out thousands of horses, maybe tens of thousands of horses with some virus that,
They had no vaccinations for them.
West Nile, whatever, kind of stuff that was serious and spread fast. That's a little bit different than the last virus, so they might not know the best treatment for them. Well, by the time they get it under control, 10,000 horses are dead.
Man.
So who's pulling the buggies? What do we got to ride? Everything in the country's, maybe not everything, but it wipes out populations of horses.
And the price goes up.
So we start shipping horses back there. And we might, the stories through the family, they might only have a big sale once every 3 to 5 years. In the meantime, you're eating beans and, there's no cash income if you're not selling horses. And that's when they'd go contract, run other people's horses and do other jobs. But anyway, so after World War II, the horse market went in the tank. I mean, there's way more horses than there was a market for.
Yeah. People were driving more and more cars around, just
driving more cars. And it's, like my family's like, well, what are we going to do? Well, they're not worth gathering. You don't have a market for them, so they just stay out there.
Yeah.
So a lot of people quit managing them, branding them, castrating them. But there was always, the numbers didn't really build. In my experience and my knowledge, the numbers didn't really build because you and I got a job working on a ranch all summer, and in the winter, we're unemployed. It's a seasonal job. Those crews that I say might be 50 cowboys on the crew, they probably only need half of that, if even that, through the winter, because the cattle are turned out on the winter range. They're not feeding them. There's nothing to do but just wait for spring, and then we'll go gather them and take them to the mountains. And so there's a lot of unemployed cowboys in the winter. Plenty of them guys, they go out and run horses. Or they might trap for fur, coyotes, beaver, whatever, lions. But they would do something like that through the winter. Well, you got a good grain-fed horse, and these horses are out there. They're not in good condition, so it's not that hard to go out there, especially if these horses haven't got away from the amateurs. In other words, they're still those horses that are kind of trained, to get held up and gather, and, there's a lot of science and whatnot to gathering horses. But anyway, the cowboys would keep the population down.
Yeah.
Of course, you had some that got away, and you kept catching the easier ones, ones that wasn't as much work. And then the Wild Horse Act was passed to protect them. And I'm not saying some of them didn't get abused, but what it was, as much as anything, I think, is instead of saying, okay, you can keep running these horses and gathering these horses, but you got to have a certain criteria. You can't be shooting them. You can't be injuring them. You can't be, whatever, or there's a penalty for it. Of some kind, whatever.
It was 1959 that the first act was passed where they said you can't round them up with a truck anymore, right? There was something about not rounding them up with a motorized vehicle.
Well, that's what got them in trouble. But they had 10 years before it went into full effect. So that gave the ranchers 10 years to get off their duff and clean the range, which my granddad did. He gathered a bunch of horses. When I was a little kid, where I'm talking kind of mid to late 60s, I don't know exactly when it was, but he had a bunch of horses in these krills, these government krills. I don't know, hunters. There were semis lined up there to haul them out of there. But he got right after it, within a few years of when that act would pass, because he could see what was going to happen. Yeah. We have to run cattle on that grass now. And, I want to say that he probably knew enough about the government, that anything they go to manage like that, it don't work out very good. So he I think he really was, looking into the future with the rancher's best interest. We got to get rid of them horses while we can.
He was one of the few then, and because there's so many who looked at like stovepipe wells in Utah, those guys did the same thing, right? They, at that time, rounded everything up. And to this day, there's no horses out there anymore. And everyone wondered, why is there no wild horses out by stovepipe well? Well, it's like those guys got after it. There used to be. They got them all.
There's very limited Mustangs in the whole Hawaii County.
Yeah.
Which is like 5 million acres.
But if you go much further south.
You go into Nevada, in Oregon.
Right.
There's a lot of them. But the herds in Idaho, and from what I understand in Nevada or in Montana and a lot of those others, they're isolated herds in pockets for the most part.
Like salmon.
Nevada, it's just all across that state and up into Oregon. Big country that was unfenced. And ours was unfenced too. But anyway, once the government took control of the horses, they did zero for them and they just kept multiplying. So it went from supposedly 28,000 on the range all over the United States. That was what the BLM said, okay, there's 28,000 horses. We're going to maintain that number. And I don't know what the numbers, they went to 100,000. Well, they went to like 50,000 or something like that.
In 2020, they almost hit 100,000.
Yeah, but not to get too deep into the numbers and everything, but there was that many more in captivity too.
Oh, yeah, that's on the range. Yeah, in captivity you had...
So basically, we went from 28,000 to 2020 at 200,000 or give or take.
Yeah.
But they didn't even do anything until they got to like 45 or 50,000 as far as gathering them to bring the numbers back down. So in a lot of areas, the horses are on the winter country, and of course cattle are out there too, and they're overgrazing areas to where the horses don't have anything to eat. Yeah. Well, the solution was, let's get rid of the cows. It doesn't matter. You get rid of the cows, the horses just populate that much more, and 5 years down the road, they're still starving.
Yeah.
Taking the cows
12 months out of the year
is a short fix. The long-term fix is we got to bite the bullet and manage the horse numbers. Now they got 100,000. I don't know what it is now. It's probably more than that. But now we have that many more in captivity, and you're paying to feed them, and I'm paying to feed them.
Yep.
It's just out of control. And the warm and fuzzies, they want to make it good for the horses. But what's the solution? I got a 3,000 head feedlot. My neighbor has a 3,000 head feedlot full of horses, BLM horses, and they're in the feedlot. They're the unadoptables. We don't put them down. We don't make there's no program for them. They just keep building numbers. And I compare it. I don't know how long we want to stay on this, but I compare it to the feral cats and dogs in town. Okay. We have feral horses out on the open range here. You have, the people that want to leave the horses out there, it's not their problem. They don't even understand the problem. But they say, no, don't do anything with them. We'll do this adoption program. That's not really a solution. That's just kind of a pacifier. But let's take the dogs and cats in town. Let's don't put any of them down. Don't euthanize any of them. And let's leave them run the streets. Let's let them have it. They can starve to death. Okay. No different than the horses starve to death out there. A lot of horses in the summer, they'll overpopulate a water source, a spring, maybe even a water trough that the ranchers put in. And there's not enough water for that number of horses. So they get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier. And because they're only getting, a gallon of water when they need, 10 or 15 gallons of water in the summer. And so basically the do-gooders that are trying to save the horses, they're killing them because they don't have a program to sustain them.
Gotcha. Oh, that's super cool to hear your perspective, because here's the thing. Everyone who speaks on this subject isn't there, right? They're not there. They're not the ones who get told by the BLM, you don't get to put your cows out there this year. Even if you could, you come out and you shouldn't put your cows out because there's nothing for them to eat anyways, right? Yeah. And it's the people who speak on these issues generally are not the ones who have anything to lose or have any idea what it's like to suffer out in the Great Basin just trying to scratch out a living, whether you're a horse, a cow, or a human, right? So in that sense, I do side with you there. I think the last question I want to ask you is, what do you hope to leave behind in the world? And that can be whatever first comes to your mind.
Well, I'm just trying to get through this life. I'm not really thinking big on what I'm going to leave behind.
Yeah. Well,
like I say, I grew up being hungry and cold a lot. That's what I remember being a kid. And I'm not hungry and cold. And I've invested in some properties. That's kind of my 401k. I haven't been an employee all my life. I have been here and there, but I don't know what it would be. Probably 90% of my time as an adult, I've been self-employed. So I don't have a lot of retirement, but I've worked like my ancestors. I've worked hard to acquire land, and I've always believed land is a good investment. Yeah. And when I say I'm a real estate developer, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. You said you hope to leave a good ranch behind for your kids.
Yeah. I mean, so when I say I'm a real estate developer, I enjoy doing that. I enjoy fixing things up. I enjoy putting improvements on it, making it, the gates swing easier and, just making it more efficient. Instead of taking a day off, I'll go reset the gates. I mean, I can look around and say, I'm proud of the way them gates swing now. They all latch. They're not sagging. They all have good latches on them. You don't have to wrestle them around or tie the baling wire shut and, anything like that. Those are the kind of things that, rather than taking a vacation, I like investing in it. A smooth, efficient running ranch.
Gotcha. You like to look back and, I see you, so you're very in the here and now. You're not so concerned about the future, but you like to look back and be proud of what's come of something.
I can't really control the future, I've learned. I mean, I think, I'm going to go this way, and I just put my head down and charge. So I think, all right, that ain't going to work so good. So, I kind of have some goals, these ranches and my horse breeding program and this, that, and the other. I have some direction, but I'm kind of waiting to see what the future brings me. I'm more of an opportunist than setting goals. But I guess, Steve and I have been working on another evidence-based horsemanship book. And it's probably going to come out this summer sometime.
Oh, great.
Maybe late summer. And it's going to be a lot more thorough. It's going to be more like an encyclopedia than what the last one was, kind of like a teaser. But as far as what I'm going to leave behind, Steve and I talk almost every day as we're going through this book. He's in Colorado and I'm in Idaho. But as far as what I'm going to leave behind, we're pretty excited about this.
Good.
And he said, this could be our legacy. And I've never really thought about leaving a legacy. That hasn't been, I hear other people, they want to leave a legacy, and this guy left that legacy, and okay, whatever, but that's not really, I've thought much about it. But this book might be something that future generations are going to look at and say, I know what you're talking about.
Good.
That's not, I'm not worried about what they put on my headstone. I don't even think that way. Whatever, my grandkids or friends or clients or whoever can get, more power to them.
That's good. I'll be sure to include a link below for Evidence-Based Horsemanship, book by Martin Black and Dr. Stephen Peters, for you guys who are interested in checking that out. I highly recommend it. But this has been super cool. It's not just getting to sit down talk with you personally. I'm also riding in this clinic this weekend, getting to work with you and my horses and so many other people interested in learning, and that's always a fun experience for me. So I appreciate what you do and the time you take to, level with people and share your experience. It's super valuable.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope there's some little nuggets here that, besides the historical stuff, I mean, history is good to know to, kind of explain the present. If you don't have the history, well, there's a lot of the present things you don't really understand.
Right. So what can people do if they're interested in learning from you? And you also have, let's see, for sale, you've got your, what are you interested in marketing?
Well,
I can ask you.
When I travel around with the contracts and starting into the clinics, people had asked me where I got my gear.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And to cut to the chase a little bit, that kind of got me interested. Well, I a lot of friends and stuff. I, got them, supplied them with gear, and finally I made it part of my business. Instead of just locating the gear to sell them, connect them with, I basically got 3 different shops. 2 of them making bits, 1 of them making rawhide gear, reins, and hair McCartys and Hackamores, Bozels.
Gotcha.
And I also got a couple more hair rope makers right now. Larry Schutte might be a familiar name. He lives real close to me there, and he supplies me with a certain amount. And another fellow in Canada that is making ropes for me. My policy is I don't sell anything that I wouldn't use, and I'm pretty particular about what I use.
Yeah.
And, I think my products there's better products, but you're going to pay like an enormous price for the TCA level of stuff. And I'm not trying to compete with that market. I'm just trying to have nice working gear, respectable, durable, authentic, all main hair ropes, main hair cores, for example. But for working gear, it's as good a quality as you're going to need. But my deal is I won't sell anything that I won't use, and I'll compare my quality and price to anybody.
Gotcha.
I don't know anybody that's selling better gear for less price. And I see a lot of people charging more money. If they get away with it, fine. I don't have a store to pay for. It's all online. martinblack.net. That's not too hard to forget.
Gotcha.
Or to remember, I mean. And my clinic schedule's in there. On there, they can find my clinic schedule. Of course, my books and videos and whatnot. So basically, anything I have, that somebody might be interested in purchasing, or clinics or books or gear or whatever,
Yeah.
it's all there.
If you're interested in the gear that he has for sale, those bits, McCarty's high quality stuff, that's there as well as evidence-based horsemanship. If you guys are interested in purchasing that book.
Yeah.
That's all on martinblack.net. Again, I'll drop that in the link below. But yeah, again, thank you so much for doing this. It's been fantastic.
Thank you. Okay.